welcome back to Elvis Retro Reviews. Today we're looking at another product from ScaleTrains. We're looking at a ScaleTrains Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern SD40-2 Phase 1A3, and this is DM&E 6359, the Mount Rushmore. It has low sound, true color paint, and you can see this box is a little beat up. I want to thank my friend for once again letting me borrow another one of his locomotives. I duly appreciate his generosity. So, I should mention that this locomotive has a few things changed to it, like the knuckles. The ScaleTrains knuckle couplers are not there. They are now moved to Katie's, I believe. There's also no instruction manual, so I'll have to yank one out of another ScaleTrains box to be able to figure out all the sounds and beautifulness of the locomotive. I hope everybody's having a good day today. Piece of foam there. And you will notice that my friend took out that clear plastic sheet that protects the locomotive. You can see the foam has been acting up here. So let's try to get this sucker out without damaging it. Otherwise I'd be in a lot of trouble. There's a couple of chuck stabilizers here. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and put that here. And let's try to get this foam out without, once again, like I said, damaging the locomotive. Come on. There we go. All right, now that we have the locomotive out of the box, let's get into some history. And now, onto some history. Now, I've already covered the history of the SD40-2 in many occasions, so I'm going to gloss over that. I will go over a locomotive history, specifically about this locomotive, but I also want to give you a little history about the Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern. Now, the Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern was started in 1986, and it ran up until 2008 when it was purchased by the Canadian Pacific Railway. At the time of its operations, it was the largest Class II railroad in the U.S. Now, our locomotive here, the DM&E 6359, was built in May of 1974 as Milwaukee Road number 193. After the Soo Line acquired the Milwaukee Road, the locomotive became Soo Line 6359, and then it was purchased by the DM&E, and it kept its road number, but now it is also known as the Mount Rushmore. All right, now with history out of the way, let's get into some details, starting with the front. Alrighty, so we're currently looking at the front of the locomotive, and we're going to start on the top and work our way down to the bottom. On the very top here, we have our Leslie RS3L horn. Just next to it, you can just see it, is this little antenna. Right below that is the main forward headlight, which operates when the locomotive is in a forward motion or in DPU mode. On either side of the headlight are the number boards, 6359 here and here. I don't remember if they light up, but we will find out when we do our sound demo. Below the headlight and number boards are the two main windshields right here as well as here, and they're separately applied windshield wipers. We also have our side mirrors here as well as here. Sorry, they are windshield wipers, not mirrors, and they're separately applied windshield wipers here as well as here. Here is the door to access the cab for the front of the locomotive. Just below the doorknob or door handle is a little plaque that I believe says fire extinguisher inside. If we focus on the nose, you can see a grab iron right here on the top of the nose, and right in front of it is the sand filter hatch. There's another grab iron that's painted yellow, and it's just right here. You'll be able to see that in much greater detail when we look at the side of the locomotive. We have our markings right here, DM&E, Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern. On either side of the letters are the two class lights here as well as here. It appears they also will light up when the locomotive has power. We have two grab irons in the yellow arrow here and as well as here. There is our walkway light right here. And as we move on to the front of the locomotive, we have our safety handrails here as well as a MU socket. We have our yellow painted coupler cup bar right here. We have 4 MU hoses that go through the plow here as well as here. There are 2 grab irons on top of the plow. They're painted black here as well as here. Here is our knuckle, the actual plow, and there's the air brake hose. All right, let's look at some rear detail. Looking at the rear of the locomotive, starting at the top here, you can see the rear sand filter hatch right here. You can see grab irons that lead from the top of the locomotive down to the walkway. We have our rear-mounted headlight, which operates when the locomotive is in a reversing motion or in DPU mode, and the locomotive facing that way, so you need this light to be on as your safety light. We have our two number boards here as well as here. They both say 6359, and they also possibly light up as well. We have our class lights here as well as here. Another DM&E right here, but painted black this time as opposed to white on the front of the nose. We have another grab iron right here in the yellow band. There is our walkway light once again. If we focus on the pilot section right here, you can see the handrails as well as another MU socket. Our yellow painted copper cup bar. The there are 4 MU hoses here as well as here. The rear air brake hose, a KD coupler because my friend has replaced the original ScaleTrains knuckle, and there is our rear snowplow. All right, let's look at some side detail. So before we actually go over the side, I really want to quickly look at a few things. First of all, the paint scheme. The paint scheme on this locomotive is actually really nice looking. I really like the DME's colors. This nice blue with the yellow stripe. These are my two favorite colors, blue and yellow. And then you mix in with the nice black DME here on the side, as well as the picture of Mount Rushmore. It says 1941 to 1991. I really just like this overall paint scheme. It's very nice looking. I love the accent here on the yellow handrails to indicate that's the safety. And now the second thing I wanted to go over is how I know this locomotive, without even looking at the history of the locomotive, is a former Milwaukee Road unit. There are three, sometimes 2, ways to figure out how this is an ex-Milwaukee Road. First of all, the placement of the mechanical bell right here. This was a staple of the SD40-2s for the Milwaukee Road. Plus, that fuel tank. That fuel tank is a lot shorter than a regular SD40-2. In fact, I'll put a picture up right now so you can see a UP SD40-2, and you can actually see the length difference between that fuel tank and the normal fuel tank of an SD40-2. That's how you know this is an ex-Milwaukee Road unit. The shorter fuel tank and the bell placed right behind the cab, and the Leslie RS3L horn as well. All right, so now let's look at some side detail. Alrighty, so we're looking at the side of the locomotive. Starting at the front here, you can see a big white F to indicate this is the front of the locomotive. Here is the handbrake right here, and it's a crank as opposed to a wheel. You can see the really great looking truck detail. This is an older ScaleTrains locomotive, but I still think it looks really good, the truck detail. You can see the speed indicator right here that leads up into the cab via this large cable. See the brake pistons here as well as here. There, and then also like the sand lines right here. There is our cab. You can see there's no sunshade on this locomotive. That was a thing of Milwaukee Road as well as Conrail locomotives. They did not have a sunshade. They decided that crews didn't need a sunshade. I don't know what the reasoning for that is, but that's what they decided. We have a rear view mirror right here that's been folded inwards. You can see the 2 windshields here that are on the side of the cab. Now they move. When I pulled this locomotive out of the box, they were completely inside the hidden compartments here as well as here, so I had to pull them out just so you can see them. We have a jack pad right here, and there's our interesting spring right here. I'm very impressed by that. We have our numbers 6359 with Mount Rushmore directly below it. Here is a battery box. Move the locomotive a little bit more forward. You can see the bell that I mentioned earlier, as well as the rear mirror here and a separately applied windshield wiper. Here's another, what I believe to be a battery box as well. Here is the blower, and there is the very short fuel tank as well as an air tank reservoir right here. And as we get closer, you can actually see the really good looking detail on this Mount Rushmore picture. I'll be honest, it's a little pixelated if I look closely, but you're not going to be looking that hard, and you shouldn't be that close looking at the locomotive, otherwise you're going to strain your eyes. You can see the flared version here of the dynamic brake fan radiator section. Move the locomotive a little bit forward, and you can see the rear walkway here, as well as the rear truck and the grates for helping cool the prime mover with that radiator section. All right, looking at the engineer's side, it's pretty much the same except for a few subtle differences. First of all, being this door right here. And there also, by the way, is the yellow grab iron that I mentioned earlier. Back to the door. Now this door is to access the electrical compartment of the locomotive that is behind the cab. That's where all the vital electronics are. like all the Dash 2 electronics of this locomotive that made it one of the most reliable and most popular locomotives in American history. And the second difference is this little window here. This is to look at your levels of hydraulics, water, fuel, basically make sure your locomotive is working properly. And you can see the other air tank reservoir right there. All right, let's look at some roof detail. Looking at the roof of the locomotive, right here you can see the Leslie RS3L horn right here, as well as an antenna. Here is the dust bin collector. We have our exhaust stack right here. Moving the locomotive even more, you can see that there are a series of lift rings that surround the dynamic brake fans, as well as the radiator fans all around. You can see them. Directly behind the dynamic brake fan radiators are the dynamic brake fan exhaust port. Dynamic brakes generate a lot of heat, so you need a port to move that heat out of there. We have our 3 radiator fans for the prime mover, and directly behind them is a widthwise grab iron for grabbing onto the top of the locomotive to pull yourself up. All right, let's get into our sound demo. Alrighty, so we have the locomotive here up on the test track, and when I hit F8 on this locomotive, it will start up because this is a loc sound equipped locomotive. In order to hear all the wonderful sounds, you need to hit F8 first. So let's go ahead and hit F8. And when I hit F8, the number boards will come on, and when we look at the headlight, I will show you that they are on. Alrighty, so we heard the extended startup sequence, and I do mean extended. The locomotive is currently idling. If I hit F0, the main headlight will come on, and now I will prove to you that the the number boards are on. You can see that they are on. Now, F1 is the bell. F2 is the horn. Very nice indeed. F3 is the handbrake. And if I hit F3 again, it will release. There we go. Now, if the locomotive was moving, we could activate F4, which is the dynamic brakes. Unfortunately, the locomotive is not moving. We need a longer track than just, say, 2 feet in order to really hear that. The best I can describe the dynamic brake fan sound is a low whine, because it's essentially, that's what it sounds like. Now, F5 is the class lights. If I hit F5 once, you can see that they are white. This is an extra train not shown in the timetable. Hit F5 again, we have green. Green is a second section of the same train symbol or number. Hit red again, and now these are the reverse move, or for DPUs, or helpers in general. Hit F again, and now they're just off. F6 is ditch lights, but this locomotive doesn't have ditch lights. F7 is the beacon or gyro light. This locomotive has neither of those either. F9 is one of my favorite features on a loc sound locomotive. If I hit F9 once, I can now move the throttle to full to simulate this locomotive helping or pulling a large, heavy train up a grade somewhere in the Dakotas. And now I can bring it all the way down, back to idle, hit F9 again. And now this locomotive can actually move. And because it's a low sound equipped locomotive, it needs to gain momentum before it can actually move. And I've also just noticed that a handrail has popped out of its socket right there. You can actually just see it. So I will definitely fix that for my friend here. Uh-oh. It is shorting out. Alright. Let's give you one more blast of the horn, and then we will shut this locomotive off. Oh, actually, we need to bring it forward a bit here. And now we will hit F8. And if you hit F8 again, it'll shut the locomotive off sound-wise. It won't shut the locomotive off on the power. This locomotive constantly has power. For instance, it just turns off the prime mover, the sounds. All right, so let's get into my final thoughts. So overall, I think this is a very good looking locomotive. Not only does it look great, but it also sounds great. The ScaleTrains knocked it out of the park with this locomotive. It's one of the early SD40-2s, like I mentioned earlier, but despite it being an older model, it still looks really great and the sound really holds up. I want to thank my friend for letting me borrow this locomotive once again. I don't know where he bought this locomotive, but I will ask him, and if there is a link, I will provide it in the description down below. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, and I almost said locomotive. Please hit that like button and also subscribe if you have not, and hit that notification bell to see what I have to upload next. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.